Hi, everybody. Hi, Maria. My
Hi.
name's my name's Clark. I'm a program coordinator at LCH Health and Community Services out in Kennett Square, West Grove, and Oxford. And I'm sitting here today with Maria from DVCCC. How are you, Maria?
I'm good. How are you, Clark?
Good, good, good. Hope you've been having some good holidays so far. We've got another one right around the corner. Um,
Yes, the countdown is real.
the countdown is real. And so, and because of all of that and everything that's going on, I wanted to talk. I thought it would be nice to talk today about stress and conflict during the holidays. I know that, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree, everyday stress doesn't disappear during the holidays. It's really easy to sweep it under the rug until that the stress and those conflicts don't fit under the rug anymore.
Absolutely.
Um, there's less daylight. Everybody's huddled together indoors. We're all budgeting for the holidays and the presents. It can be really stressful, and it's the perfect recipe for conflict in your household.
I couldn't agree more. Some conflicts might even show signs of unhealthy and abusive relationships.
Mhm.
So, if there are parts of an argument that turn into personal attacks or impact your self esteem, those are clear signs of unhealthy relationships. And I do think that, just like you were mentioning about specifically about stress, I think when stress, especially around the holidays, which is like a huge, like a high emotional moment for everyone, whether it be a good thing or a bad thing, if it's rehashing things from your childhood in a good way or in a bad way,
Mhm.
grieving the loss of a loved one, the reality of like budgeting during the holiday, all of the stresses that come with the holidays along with everyday life is like it could all be like a recipe for disaster. And so I feel like it is more of a mirror and it brings those things out more. So it's important to notice that and to know that, especially when family is all together for holidays, we can see the
Mhm.
good, the bad, and the ugly in each other, right? So if the person in the conflict is trying to impose their power, their control, their manipulation, you might be experiencing the signs of an abusive relationship, or you might be seeing that in your loved one as you guys spend all of this time together during the holidays with Christmas and New Year's. So remembering that your safety and health and happiness are ultimately the best and the utmost priority.
Mhm.
So, talking about communication tools that we can use for conflict resolution is exactly what we're here to do today for these very reasons. And it might work well in healthy relationships, but might not be enough when it comes to an unhealthy or an abusive relationship because there is a big distinction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Maria. I think that one of the biggest ways to get through a conflict with a loved one, with a family member, with a friend, is through effective communication, through good communication. Um, and it's really important to remember though that even if you're in a healthy relationship, with a significant other or family member, friend, things aren't going to be perfect all the time. People disagree all the time. What is important though, what's the most important is that there's that effort, that the people who are having the conflict are at least trying to get through it. You really want to, be on the same team, trying to solve, the
Exactly.
issue or the argument at hand.
I couldn't agree more.
Um, yeah. So what do you? So we talked about communication, effective communication. Sometimes we, say things we don't mean to say when we really want to say something else, or get through it. But what are some good ideas, good tools, good methods for healthy communication and conflict resolution?
So first and foremost, going along right alongside that, when we start right, one of the main things that is important for us to know is setting those boundaries is going to be key. I think just like you were saying earlier, healthy relationships does involve conflict, right? Like I think a lot of the time we
Mhm.
tend to think if there's no conflict, then that's a good relationship. When in reality, people are going to bump heads, people are going to have different opinions, they're going to see things differently, and that's why it's so important to know the distinction between conflict in a healthy relationship versus an abusive and an unhealthy and like toxic relationship. I do
Sure.
think that our generation is like oversaturating the word toxic. So I think again, it's also important to know that for that very reason. And so ultimately, I say this to my boyfriend all the time: like we want to argue well, right? We're always argue if
Mhm.
we are going to argue because it's bound to happen. You want to argue well, and you want to remember that like you love each other in the midst of that argument, whether it be a romantic relationship, a platonic friendship, a family relationship. So setting those boundaries are going to be key. You deserve to be treated with respect, and that doesn't go out the window because somebody's angry. And so
Yeah.
recognizing that if you're on that like high point, or if you're on the edge, like you need to take a step back. You say, you know what, let me take a walk, let me take a moment, let's walk away from each other. We can come back to this, because you can always come back to the situation and have a conversation, but you can't take those words back that are said in the heat of the moment. So that's always going to be number one.
For sure. And then the next issue, and for those who are watching, we put together a map of a handful of tools that we thought were really important for, just different things to think about. They may not all be perfect for you at the time of the disagreement, or you may not even think of them at the time, but it's okay. These are just some things to put in your pocket and use at the right time. So one of the other tools that we think is a really good idea is to figure out the real issue. Why are you actually fighting? Why are you actually disagreeing? Sometimes, for example, you could feel bad for one reason, but argue about anything else because it's just a release. Sometimes if you can figure out what is really making somebody else upset, or what you're really upset about, it'll take away some of the other less important, but hurtful words that you might say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I do think a lot of it is not just what somebody is saying, it's how they're saying it too.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not even be what you're arguing about, but how that person came across, or how they shut you down while you're trying to speak. So it's those kind of things that happen again in the heat of the moment. That's why it might be important to recognize when somebody needs to take a walk or walk away. It's also important to know your argument style, where it comes down to knowing if you need time before you can really, to reflect before you can really have a conversation about it and need to revisit it later. Or some people just really want to, work it out and figure it out in that moment. And so recognizing that in yourself is also going to be very important. And it tends to be that, unfortunately, especially with our survivors, when you are so used to being berated and talked down to, it just comes down to the fact that like you either flee from conflict because of that, because it's something that you've seen unfortunately traumatically experienced. So those are the kind of things that are really important to recognize. And along those lines, agreeing to disagree. Some disagreements, they won't be resolved. They can't be resolved. You see things differently, and that's okay.
Yeah.
If there's an issue that's too important to ignore, you might want to consider and reconsider the relationship that you're in. And so maybe having those difficult conversations and really taking the time to figure that out for yourself.
Yeah. Some people might, like peanut butter more than other people might like jelly more. It's just what it is, and you live with it. But you can still go shopping. And then, along those lines, compromise is important, and it's so hard to do sometimes, but it's so valuable. And you have to find the balance, find the middle ground. It's kind of like agreeing to disagree sometimes. Maybe you give a little so that you can gain together. You don't have to win every battle. Just come to a middle ground.
Exactly. And again, it reiterates the point that you made earlier, that you're remembering what you're fighting for and who you're fighting with. And it's you and your person, or you and your family member versus the problem, and not you against them. And that's always something really important to keep in mind. Considering the entirety of the situation, thinking about why your partner or the person that you're having this discussion or conflict with is acting the way that they are, or saying what they're saying. Can you see things from their point of view? It's really important to see, or try to step into somebody's shoes to see the lens in which they're viewing things, because they might be viewing it as an attack, when in reality you're just saying something, out of love, that you feel like something, a point of growth, or something that they can grow through, just to name a few examples. But those are the kind of things that we want to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a saying that people use a lot. It's talking about how it lands. Also, that's another aspect to the consideration of all of it. I might say something that seems innocent, but if I put it out one way, it might land more hurtfully than intended. And that maybe we don't mean to say things, maybe subconsciously we do, but we need to consider other people's feelings and consider why they react, why the person you're having a conflict with maybe reacts a certain way. Maybe you're provoking them and you don't know.
Exactly.
One way, and this doesn't work every time, but I think it's very valuable, that you can have things land a little bit easier or more softly, is by using I statements. And again, it's really important to know that if you're in an abusive relationship, this may not be the best tool. This may not be the best idea. But if you're having a conflict, a disagreement, instead of throwing darts and just blame, and saying, Maria, you did this, you made me, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
You want to start a sentence with I. It really helps when you say, I feel this way when you did that, or I wasn't so sure about this decision. Make it about yourself, and there's the light. People are more likely to listen and less likely to respond aggressively.
Right.
In healthy relationships, of course.
Absolutely.
If you start with your own feelings. Again, the you statements tend to make people more defensive.
Right. It puts them on the defense, and it seems like you're being like super reactive. So I completely agree. I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from this year entirely is accountability. And that goes alongside the I statements. You know, I have done this, or I feel like maybe when you said this is how it came across, rather than, well, you did this, you did that, you did this. Like it completely changes the trajectory of the conversation and even the situation. So I think alongside that as well, we want to think about our priorities. Do you want to win the argument, or do you want to keep the relationship strong? Just like we were saying earlier, we want to remember what we're fighting for and who we're fighting with. And it's just, you know, winning the argument goes out the window when you are fighting with your person, with your friend, with your loved one, and remembering that and using that lens in the way in which we approach any type of conflict. At all. So some of these tools might work better for you and your partner or family member, while others might just be less effective and they might not work for you. They might not be your cup of tea. But finding which tools make you the most comfortable and seeing what works for you is going to be key in how we handle any type of conflict going forward. And that can be professionally, personally, in any capacity.
Absolutely. And it can be really hard to make your first I statement. It can be really hard to open up and say, I feel this way when you. It can be really hard to set boundaries and decide that enough is enough. You're being hurtful. We can't fight until, or not you're being hurtful, but I'm feeling hurt. We need to put this fight aside for now.
Yeah.
That can be really hard to do, and it can be scary to do. So we need to know when it's safe to do these, to use these tools. We need to know when it's okay, and maybe practice first. Use what works for you. Don't use what doesn't work for you. Exactly. If you don't think you can ever compromise or agree to disagree, maybe we reevaluate the relationship that you're in. And maybe you can find a way to. Go ahead.
When we set those boundaries, we want to make sure we honor them. I think that's something that I personally have struggled with, where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to put my foot down. Then I come back and I'm like, wait, I feel really bad when. And it's like just being able to honor yourself and celebrate those wins too, because it's not about winning the argument or winning the disagreement, but it's about celebrating in the fact that like you are holding yourself accountable, you're valuing yourself in the relationship, respective, you know, whatever it may be within that conflict. Because again, you want to make sure that you're respecting one another, and having that conversation respectfully starts with I statements, starts with setting boundaries, starts with really stepping outside and evaluating, is this really what I want? Is this really what I want to, who I want to do this with?
Yeah, for sure. And the most important thing, we said it towards the beginning, and it's worth repeating, is that your safety, your health, your happiness are yours, and you deserve all of them.
Yes.
They're your number one priority. And if the relationship that you're in is negatively impacting your health, your safety, or even your happiness, you know, there are people to talk to. LCH has behavioral health counselors who are here. DVCCC has a wonderful team of people who are willing to listen to. Our phone numbers are here. Feel free to call them below, reach out to us on our Facebook, or give us a phone call. Just thank you for watching. Have a great rest of the holiday season, and thanks for coming. We'll see you next time around. Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.